In the lead up to Governor Lamont's address to the state on his proposed budget, there is concern over where municipalities would end up. Funding is up, but there are questions about whether this trend will be predictable and reoccurring as municipalities like Stamford lead us out of the pandemic. Stamford Mayor David Martin joins the Municipal Voice to discuss where municipalities stand in the budget and where we can see growth in 2021. We'd like to thank our premier sponsor at Digital Back Office, Palo Alto Networks. Check them out at digitalbackoffice.com or paloaltonetworks.com. The Municipal Voice is the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities podcast in collaboration with WNHH LP 103.5 FM. I'm your host, Matt Ford. As always, be sure to give us a like and let us know what you're thinking in the comments. CCM's Municipal Voice podcast continues to present a key forum on important state-local issues. The views expressed do not necessarily reflect the consensus views of CCM or our member municipal leaders. Mayor, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Matt. Glad to be here.
So, just this past week, Governor Ned Lamont gave a presentation on the fiscal year 2022 biennial budget. And there's a whole lot to unpack and consider for that year. And we'd like to take some time with you to go over some of the points on this. And first and foremost, I think, with still being in this pandemic, are you concerned about municipal funding levels?
Well, first of all, Matt, yes, absolutely concerned about municipal funding levels. And Stamford gets a lower percentage of its budget from the state than any other community in the country that's got more than 100,000 people. Now, maybe there's somebody out there that gets as low as us, but I can't find them. And so, yes, I am very concerned about municipal funding and how we struggle on without very much help coming from the state or, for that matter, the federal government. At the same time, my focus right now is about the pandemic. It is about getting vaccine rollout. I think that you probably saw, and many of your listeners saw, that the governor, in fact, texted out that Stamford is one of the largest and the most diverse communities in the state. When you looked at the other diverse communities, we've gotten a higher percentage of our 75 years and older vaccinated than any other community.
That's good.
I'm involved with those vaccine decisions here and how the city is working with our local hospital, Stamford Health, Stamford Hospital, every day. And so I'm not certain that I know all the details of what happens 80 miles away in Hartford, just as I don't think they always know all the details of what's going on over here in Stamford.
Yeah, speaking of some of the confusion between the state and town sometimes, like at first glance, it appears with this budget that municipalities will be seeing an increase in funding, but most of that comes from federal funds and some bonding. How do you feel about the way they're doing this as a municipal leader?
I'm more concerned about the structural issues that exist in many of the funding formulas that the state uses. And I would tell you that there are 2 or 3 really core issues that I don't believe the state is fundamentally addressed. And I'll be honest, Stamford is at the wrong end of those spectrums, and I am representing my community. But I don't think this is just about Stamford. I think the state isn't doing what it should do in terms of its funding formulas. And so I'm more focused on that as an issue, and I understand. It's hard to change decisions that were made 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago that continue to become part of the culture and the way the funding works. That's more of the issue rather than what did I get yesterday? What am I going to get tomorrow? Now, what I saw is that we are going to be level funded for the prior year, plus the money that gets passed through from the feds. And what the Fed formula is better than what the state was doing for us. I'm still not real happy with this, but at least, it's more transparent what they're doing, how they're doing it, why they're doing it. And I'm not going to pretend that I get to decide what Congress does. But it's better than what the state was doing in terms of its distribution formulas. And maybe I can give you a snapshot of what some of those issues are. It is very convenient to say, oh, what's the grand list per capita? Oh, the wealthy communities have a high grand list per capita. What I think we should be looking at is what is the residential property tax burden? Now, I know you have to do a calculation or two, but that's what really matters is how much residential property tax are we putting on our residents relative to their income. So I can guarantee you that the big four cities that have a lot of poverty within their communities, they charge substantially less residential property tax per person than Stamford. And what's interesting is that the very wealthy communities, some of whom are down here in Lower Fairfield County, adjacent to Stamford, they actually put more of a property tax on their members. But when you look at it versus the income, you'll find that Stamford carries a very heavy burden relative to its income, and that's because of the way the state formulas are all going to that grand list as if that's the magic. But we know that some communities have deliberately done changes to lower their grand list, and then they say, oh, look how high our mill rate is. Well, if you deliberately lower your grand list through some legal action, then of course your mill rate's going to be higher. And I'm not trying to say that we should take away the resources to the communities that have to deal with a lot of poverty, particularly in education. But the real problem with these formulas is twofold. One is that I assert, and there's so many people that will disagree, but I don't think they are truly looking at what's happening. The results of these formulas, there's very little need. When it comes to education, it almost doesn't matter what your number of free and reduced lunch is, and the number of special education, the amount of English language learners. It's almost irrelevant. It doesn't really matter very much. And they'll say, oh, yeah, but it's in the formula. It's in the formula. You can put it in the formula. The question is, does it come out the other side? And that's my first problem. But an even bigger problem is this state has been called out for having some of the most segregated school districts in the country, some of those segregated populations, the way we've cut this state into 169 different balkanized little cities. And what I tell you is that the formulas that we're using actually are penalizing the diverse cities within our state. They are penalizing the school districts that are diverse by giving them less funding than they would otherwise be entitled to. And coming from the most diverse city in the state, I can tell you that I'm particularly troubled by this. And I don't think they're doing it deliberately. Nobody's deliberately saying, let's make it more of a segregated formula. Let's pay segregated communities as opposed to diverse communities. I just don't think they're aware of how these formulas are working and how the economic interest that they claim that they want to support, particularly with dealing with the intergenerational challenges of educating kids from poor communities. You have to give additional resources if you think that that's an important mission for us to achieve. And I happen to believe that. And we have 58% of our children are on free and reduced lunch. And we get almost nothing to support them because we're so-called a wealthy community. But then when you look at what the residential property taxes are and compare that to income, you find out that, hey, we're one of the highest in the state. And I put it back on these formulas. So Matt, if you want to know about what I see about the short term, I'm worried about getting vaccine into people's arms. That's most important for their health. And quite frankly, it's important for our economic recovery. It's important that we get back to functioning again. We have a very robust small business environment here. And it's, as you might expect, we were at the epicenter of the risk. We're close to New York City. We have a diverse community. And we had the real challenge of avoiding something much worse. And now we need to get that vaccine out, get that to everybody. But that's our first priority. In the meantime, I understand we're level funded. You know, in the 7 years that I've seen the state budgets, I think only 2 years, I could be wrong about this, I think only 2 years did they actually pay us everything they promised.
And that's educational cost sharing funds. Is that the municipal revenue sharing as well?
Yes. I mean, and a few years ago,
the budget that the governor put out, both of those, I think he discussed delaying the municipal revenue sharing and the educational cost sharing funds.
Yes, they were supposed to move forward another year, and I will tell you, this is common. Is that A few years ago, we were promised something that would have sales tax from the area would be distributed back within the area. It doesn't come. Everything that is supposed to alleviate some of our challenges goes away, and then they put in a new formula that is designed to take money or minimize the amount of money that goes to Stamford in favor of other communities. Yeah. I'm not so much upset about supporting those communities that have true challenges, particularly again on the education. It is that the gap between what is happening and what we receive is so enormous that we have a struggle doing what we need to do for our children, to educate our children here that come from a diverse and in many cases a lower socioeconomic community. And that's what we need. So when the governor postpones those formulas do just a tiny bit to move in a direction that provides for more justice on the economic formulas. We need to move a lot further than this little bit, but he postpones it, and I understand why. The state of Connecticut is challenged economically. We could get on our soapboxes here and talk about how great it is or how not great it is, etc. But this state is struggling on an economic basis, and balancing the budget is a hard thing to do. And that's why I think so many times we have promises of what's to come. Those promises, like this delay for a year, are hard to realize.
A total of $220 million from one-time federal stuff is coming into the state for elementary, secondary school emergency relief fund. Cover things like improving air quality in schools, learning loss. How is Stamford's school system preparing and dealing with COVID, and kind of what practical uses do these funds have for a city like Stamford?
I believe that we are, of a major city, the most capacity constrained with the school system. And we have the oldest schools. I mean, we have a couple of new schools that are very good and very attractive and well done. But we basically, and if you really want to roll it back, you find out that almost all the major diverse communities in the state get 60, 70, 80% funding for their school capital projects. And that creates incentives to do things such that, one city has 40 schools. We have 21. Why that huge difference? Well, because they're getting funded. And the average for the state is around 55%. And Stamford gets 28%. And as a result, we don't have the monies to invest. So what that's meant is that when coronavirus, the pandemic has hit us, what the school district decided to do, and I was supportive of this, is they went to a hybrid model. And we've essentially been in the hybrid model here in Stamford from the opening all the way through. We did remote distance learning on a couple of days just before Thanksgiving, and we did remote learning for a couple of weeks after the New Year's, because we had seen the spikes that had gone on after Thanksgiving, the spikes that had gone after New Year's. And it wasn't so much that the schools are a place where coronavirus is spreading. We're doing the contact tracing. The health department is spending a lot of resources contact tracing. We're not seeing very much a negligible amount of spread occurring within the schools. And almost every situation can be traced back to people not following the protocols. So if you don't wear your mask and you meet with the other teachers in a small room, come on, that's not what we're supposed to be doing, but that's what somebody did, and for good reasons, bad reasons, whatever the reasons. So we've been running that hybrid model, and that's a huge challenge. In a diverse community where kids are going to school every other day, it is a huge challenge. And I would tell you that, the real challenge is we come back to the children that are disadvantaged. They are particularly disadvantaged in a world without in-person learning. Their families are particularly disadvantaged because many of them can't work from home, and their parents are busy. So how are they supposed to deal with daycare? The challenges are extremely tough in that audience, and I can't quote any of the studies off the top of my head, but those that have gone to remote learning, if it's of a more challenged socioeconomic status, those kids are losing out big time. And if you listen, what I'm saying is that's in fact our highest priority, is to make those changes so that those kids have the opportunities of the American dream, and we've got to provide that assurance that they're going to get the educational opportunities and then the future opportunities that everyone else is entitled to. The federal government, because they're using Title I schools, or because they're using CDBG, which is at least looking down at the census tract level and finding those areas that have those challenges, that's a better formula than what the state is doing. We just look at the average for the community. And when you look at the average of the community and you take a diverse city, we don't get very much. Whereas a rich city gets about the same as we do, and a poor city gets a lot more. And we were actually looking through the most recent funding formula that the state used to distribute the CARES Act money for July through December. And just as a hypothetical exercise, we said, what if we take that formula and we look at Bridgeport? And Bridgeport's got about 145,000 people, plus or minus, and they got about 4.6 million, 4.5 million, somewhere in that, is funding out of that CARES Act. That's what it was. And Fairfield, right next door, got, it's about 60,000, so it's a little bit less than half the size, and they got about 500,000. So you had the two together, got 4.5 plus 0.5, so two together got $5 million. You take a relatively homogeneous poor community, which is Bridgeport, and a relatively homogeneous wealthier community, which is Fairfield, and they might disagree with those words, but I think we would look at the degree, the numbers inside, and we would say one is relatively poor across the board, some exceptions, and one's relatively wealthy across the board, some exceptions. You combine those two together, they get $5 million. What if you actually merged Bridgeport and Fairfield together? Call it Bridgefield. If you don't like that, I'm willing to compromise, call it Fairport. I don't care. Combine the two communities together, and instead of a population of about 145,000, you got a population that's 205,000. You look at what their grand list and the adjusted grand list, and you use those formulas and the other stuff that's in there. And when you combine the two communities together and go through the calculations, the combined community gets about $3 million. So as separate homogeneous communities, you get 5, but as a diverse community, you only get 3.
Yeah.
And then we complain that we're the most segregated state in the country.
Yeah.
You've got formulas that are encouraging the segregation. And, people can take a objection to some of my words. I haven't practiced the words. Okay. I'll change the words. I can use Fairport or I can use Bridgefield. Either way. But at the bottom end of this, or the bottom line of this thing, is their diverse communities are truly struggling. Who's the most diverse community? It's Stamford. Oh, you're wealthy. You got a high grand list. When you look at that whole formula and what's happening, you're not really taking care of the need. At least the federal government is reaching down and looking at the census tracts on the CDBG money. And that begins to change the formula, or when they're looking at Title I schools. Now, you still have the same issue. I can take my school district and I can put all the low socioeconomic people in a few schools, and I'll have more Title I schools.
Yeah.
But we've spread it out to try to make it as diverse and as integrated as we possibly can throughout all our schools. That means a lot more busing. That means new types of challenges. But it also means we have fewer Title I schools than we would otherwise.
Yeah.
So we're right back to if you try to recognize the importance of diversity, then you get punished with the formulas.
You are listening to the Municipal Voice on WNHH LP 103.5 FM.
There's a lot of things that we should be doing more regionally. Now, I'm not in favor of regional government. We all want to, hold on to our independent, 169 communities.
Yeah.
But would it make sense to be crazy about it as a simple, as a silly example. Would it make sense to basically every community does its highways on its own? So we're going to do the Merritt Parkway and I-95, which runs through Stamford. We're going to do it on our own.
Yeah.
And then Darien can handle its piece, and Greenwich can handle its piece, and on up the line, so that Stratford and New Milford and New Haven, and they'll all do their own federal highways. Do you think that would make any sense at all?
Yeah, each one of those is a separate company you have to get, separate bids. Yeah.
Well, it isn't just that. It is that, well, in our case, we're not fixing the bridge because it costs too much. In another case, the thing works great. Imagine Metro North. Imagine Metro North, where some of the track is in great repair and you can move along at 50, 60, 70 miles an hour. And some of the track, you're at risk of derailment and they're moving along at 10 miles an hour.
Yeah, there's definitely some roads where you're driving along, you can tell when you cross the border because all of a sudden the potholes start showing up.
Exactly. So that concept of there are times when Stamford first means that I need the Norwalk Walk Bridge to be fixed.
Yeah.
If the Norwalk Walk Bridge doesn't get fixed and it falls in the river, that's damaging to Stamford. Yeah. And it goes in both directions. Now, that's only an example to make it more obvious, but we just joined with the state's emergency communication system. It saves us money because they'll deal with the fixed costs, and every community dealing with the fixed cost of a radio system is more expensive. So it saves us some money. But the bigger benefit is when the truly big emergency comes, our emergency people, whether it's the ambulance or the fire or the police or the operations departments, we can talk to other communities that previously were in a different radio system. That regionalization of that particular thing makes a lot of sense. My point is that there are many examples of where things actually might work better on a small regional basis. So now you ask, well, if we get rid of the local funding, is that we're all going to stand on our own and we're all going to do our own thing? For some things, it probably doesn't matter. But it is more than state roads, and Stamford has more local roads, more miles, more lane miles of local roads than any other community in the state. Yeah. And it doesn't just benefit Stamford. Yeah. If those local lane miles are not paved, and I'm not talking about necessarily every road in a neighborhood, but for instance, I'm spending a lot of money to pave roads that weren't paved for the decade before I got into office. There was almost zero paving of our arterial and collector roads. And for that matter, even the state roads weren't being paved in Stamford, and we're catching up on that. But that paving of that road doesn't just benefit Stamford, it benefits an economy that is in fact a destination economy for much of Lower Fairfield County. And the state is better off because it collects the sales tax, and it collects the income tax, and it collects the hotel tax. It collects all these taxes that come from the regional strength of Stamford. We need to get some of our roads paved and to expect that the Stamford residents are going to pave the roads so that the state can get the benefit of the economic activity. Well, there needs to be some balance here. And it's not about we want more. It is we are collectively better off if we find that right equations. And the state, for instance, just imposed, as part of the police accountability bill, I believe that they just imposed there's supposed to be cameras on police cars. Okay. Well, Stamford, at great cost, went to body cameras as soon as we could. Shortly after I became elected, I pushed that was one of my agendas. I live in a diverse community. There's lots of challenges. And we've had a couple of incidents that people have raised questions about. We've put every bit of body of camera on the website. And it took some time to do that, but we have hundreds of hours of body camera on our website to deal with those two incidents so that we're not being accused of anything else. But now they want to put it in the cars. And I agree that's a benefit to having it in the cars. The benefit doesn't just accrue to Stamford. The benefit accrues to anybody who is driving into Stamford and might become involved in an accident or involved in a pedestrian or a motor vehicle stop. So the
was there
benefit
funding
of putting them
included in that for the
there
camera?
was, but my understanding was $4 million.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I could use half of that money in Stamford alone.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a negligible amount of money. So here's a state mandate. And quite frankly, I think it's a decent state mandate. But in fact, it's saying that we're all better off if we all have a common approach to putting cameras in police cars. Okay. But if the benefit goes to everybody, shouldn't the cost be spread out to everybody? The state should be funding a substantial portion of that, quote, unfunded mandate. If the state believes that this is a benefit to everyone, then the state should be funding it for everyone. And maybe not 100%. I'll settle for 80%.
How do you feel about the idea of a tiered system for something like pilot?
I'm opposed to it.
Is that another
Then
case
ask
where-
me a different question. Do I believe that the pilot funding should be changed and increased? And the answer is yes.
Okay.
Now, Stamford is not going to be a big benefactor of the pilot program. I mean, we do have a major hospital that serves the whole region. We now have a Yukon campus. We have the other nonprofit agencies which tend to be located in Stamford rather than in surrounding communities. So pilot is of importance to us, but certainly not like it is in
Hartford or
Hartford or New Haven or some of the other towns.
Kind of moving on a little bit from,
Would you like to get back to this year's budget?
Well, kind of, not exactly. Moving on from state aid and these formulas and stuff, I think what we would all like is to see our economies grow on their own. What could the state be doing to incentivize growth over the next 2 years?
What was it? The land of steady habits? The community, the state that refuses to deal with the modern economic realities. A lot's been said recently about people fleeing New York, where the coronavirus, the pandemic was so terrible, and moving into Lower Fairfield County. And to some degree, that includes Stamford, because we've managed to keep our community safer than where they're coming from. That's also a reflection on the challenges, because there's a lot of interconnection between what happens in New York and Stamford. And incidentally, you got to give the governor a fair amount of credit for what's happened in this state in terms of the pandemic. And I don't mean to in any way diminish that. But if you take this current pandemic and sort of push it to a side for a moment, with a few exceptions, this state is losing college-educated millennials, people between the ages of 20 and 40. This state is losing that population. I call that the future workforce. Your small businesses only succeed, our restaurants in particular, if there's people that want to go out and go to the restaurants and have the disposable income in order to do that. If we lose that future workforce, those college-educated millennials, and listen, it's not as if they're the elite or special or anything, but in terms of our own self-interest, we want as a state that demographic to be the robust creator of new job opportunities. And whether it is that companies like Indeed or Charter Communication locate here in Connecticut or specifically in Stamford, I can guarantee you, you go and you talk to Indeed, and I've met with their executives, and they've got hundreds of people employed in Stamford. They're looking for people with certain skill sets, which tend to be younger and tend to be college education. And listen, that hasn't really changed in 100 years. We're looking for the future. We're always looking for that future workforce. The state is losing that future workforce, with the exception of some communities. Stamford is in fact growing that population, and as a result, we're able to attract some major businesses like Hinkle, like Charter, like Indeed, like Kayak is located in Stamford. I mean, we've got and we've got Synchrony located.
Yeah.
I mean, and they made a choice to come here. And the number one issue in their choice is workforce. Do you have the workforce that I need? And that's what that's what we should be trying to address across Connecticut. And so while there may be things happening in local communities, I can guarantee you that the economic vitality of Wilton, of New Canaan, and Darien, which are so wealthy, depend upon Stamford having the future workforce to attract the businesses that generate income for people that they go then spend on small businesses.
Yeah.
And that's in fact, who spends the most on the small businesses? It is the millennials and those that are doing family formation. And if we can't provide school opportunities in Stamford that are equivalent, then they'll come here for a while and then they'll say, well, wait a minute, your schools are overcrowded and the buildings are kind of dilapidated. And I'm going to say, well, the state isn't helping. Everybody else gets about 55, 60% on average. We get 28%. We're the ones that are actually creating that future environment. And as I sometimes say, you give more money to Stamford, the state will get it back because we will create that environment for the future. And let me tell you, that is very difficult. There's a lot of people in Stamford, as well as the rest of the state, that are so opposed. Oh, we don't want that. We don't want that. I'm sorry. Losing population with the amount of unfunded liabilities that exist within the state of Connecticut, the amount of debt that exists within the state of Connecticut. You can't get there from here if you can't create an environment that attracts that future workforce.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to do. And if we succeed in Stamford, the state will be the benefactor.
One kind of perennial issue for us at CCM is that the state of Connecticut is over-reliant on the property tax. Is there things that the state could be doing this year to help towns and cities lower those property taxes?
Well, of course there are. But I would tell you, are we going to rob Peter to pay Paul? And that's the real challenge that the state has, and the state makes the decision almost always. We're going to rob Paul, the towns, in order to pay Peter.
Yeah. And
that's the real challenge. But if I could count on what our revenue support was going to be every year, one of my greatest uncertainties is the state going to pay what it says it's going to pay? They say something, and then sometimes they do something else.
Yeah, it's not even just the formulas. It's that there's the formula, and then some years that formula doesn't get adhered to, and you just don't even get what you're supposed to be.
Well, the state has the jurisdiction. We are all creatures of the state. And there are so many issues surrounding how things are implemented. And some of it has to do with the complexities of diversity and the fact that we have 169 different towns and whatnot. But you want to help the cities start investing where your future economic opportunities are. The state will get richer. The state will get better off if it invests where it has future economic opportunities. It will better deal with trying to provide opportunities from those people at the low end of the economic spectrum in diverse communities, which we say we want. If you invest in those places that are diverse, invest where they are diverse. Invest where the community has made a point of making certain that all of its schools have roughly equal mixture of black and brown and white and whatnot. Invest there. Invest where your principles are. Invest where your own economic future lies. That's what I want to see the state start doing. We have to compete in Stamford for every job we bring to this community. There are some major cities which, as they have a guaranteed job base that pays a living wage. We don't have that. We're competing to bring it to Stamford, and it's tough because other than the State Department of Economic Opportunity, which is the ECD, which is working to help attract businesses to come to Stamford. But I got news for you. You can't buy the companies to come to Stamford.
Okay.
Yes, the package deal and what the economics are absolutely important. Absolutely.
The tax things and the special
yeah, all
whatever.
that stuff. You have to do that. If you don't do that, they're never coming. But if that's all you're doing, you will lose.
Mm-hmm.
You have to create the environment where they want to be in the first place. And I can guarantee you, where you sit here in Connecticut, we have high cost energy, we have high cost transportation, we don't have raw materials, we have high cost labor. You tell me, what is it that people want, at least down in this corner of the state? They want an educated workforce.
Yeah.
That's where we win, because the state of Connecticut actually does better at an educated workforce. That's where we should be investing. And the fact that we are losing too many graduates from Yale University, we're losing too many graduates of UConn, and they're going to other places because there's other places that are have more opportunities for that sort of workforce. We need to keep them in Connecticut, and we need to invest in the places that would give them that lifestyle. I say the same thing here. I want to create the environment that future workforce wants to live.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
And it seems like
if I do that, then the businesses will say, "Oh, you've got that future workforce. I'll locate." No, I want a deal, but I'll locate here because you have the future workforce. Once I've got that, now I've created jobs, not just for that group, but I've created jobs for accountants and lawyers, in addition to the software engineers and the millennials and their skills. And I've created jobs for food service and security and maintenance. We create jobs all across the spectrum, and that's how we win. And does the state as overall recognize that? And I don't see it in the formulas. I don't see it in the funding that's going to Stamford.
Yeah, you talk about having to chase some of those jobs and other things, and it does seem like, as compared to the state as a whole, Stamford has seen success over the last 10 years in some economic growth and stuff. What is it that you're doing that the other towns aren't, maybe?
I just do the opposite of what they do. That's unfair. That's unfair.
Yeah.
One of our biggest successes is our downtown special services district. It's
Okay.
And they charge themselves extra taxes in order to change the environment. And I, in fact, was the person that got it passed on the Board of Representatives. I don't know how long ago. I lose track, Matt. I'm getting a little older. I'm a little bit beyond 40 at this point.
Yeah.
But I helped get that passed on the Board of Representatives, I'm going to say 30 years ago, whatever it was. And they take that extra tax and they do it to promote the collective of the downtown. You know, previously, every business owner is promoting their own particular thing, but collectively the downtown isn't being promoted, and people don't want to come downtown because it's unsafe. And so the downtown, nobody wants to live downtown, and so it's vacant at night. There's no activity going on at all. That's what it was 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And we've been on a change direction, and what they're using their funds for are to change the environment of the downtown. And that some of the things they're doing are the closing down Bedford Street and having an arts and crafts fair, having the Alive at 5 shows that exist on Wednesdays and Thursday nights, not during the pandemic, unfortunately, but at other times. And people come from all around to come to Stamford to hear blues travelers do their songs, or whatever group that they're attracting, you know, Three Dog Night or whomever it is. And they've changed the whole atmosphere, so now people want to live downtown. They're coming to the downtown, and the crime is going down, and the people want to live here, which creates that vitality for the small businesses. That's what creates the vitality of the small businesses. I can't give it away to the small businesses fast enough to prop them up.
Yeah.
But if I can create the demand, they're here. And so we have the most robust small business, primarily restaurants in the downtown, but it's not just restaurants going on. And people want to live here. They want to come down here. They talk about coming down to go to this restaurant or that restaurant, or to go to the Palace Theater or whatever show they're doing. That didn't exist 30 years ago. That's
Yeah.
what we're doing.
Yeah.
And the big developments in the South End,
Hmm.
the South, we took on a lot of debt, or technically the Antares that became BLT took on a lot of debt.
Hmm.
And so our tax funding is going to support that debt to make all those improvements, which incidentally is, they ramped up our grand list, we get less money, but we actually borrowed a lot of money in order to make the improvements. So can we subtract that back, please? In any event, so that development has attracted not only empty nesters coming from within Stamford and from other communities, but
Yeah.
it's attracting and creating a lifestyle that is attractive to the new generation of the future workforce.
Bringing those millennials and those people that are starting families into town. So even though that downtown district you're talking about actually charges them more taxes, those companies are paying more in taxes. It wasn't a tax break from the state or whatever that got them there. It's that there's now a workforce that wants to be there, and they want access to that workforce.
Absolutely. And the restaurants and all the other small businesses, whether they're hairstyling or fashion, the boutique fashion places, or whether it's the restaurants, which I keep mentioning because it keeps coming to top of mind. It is those small business which cater to more of a service industry focus, less retail. Listen, retail is challenged across the board due to the Amazons and the like. But nonetheless, that service industry blossoms because people want to live here. That's what makes it work. And the same thing is happening in the South End. And people aren't really aware of it, but there are events being held in the South End. The city's not holding the events.
Yeah.
The DSSD isn't holding the events. The apartment building owners are holding events to attract people to the South End. And whether it's a Harbor Fest where everything's about celebration of the harbor and the oysters and all that other good stuff, or whether it's some of the charity runs that have been done in the South End, they get some excitement and people are saying, hey, this is a great place to live.
Yeah.
And listen, a lot of people, I don't want that. I don't want that. Our future depends upon it. The city of Stamford, like the state, has huge unfunded liabilities. And in order to succeed, we need to keep our economic engine going. And if our economic engine fails, those liabilities just get more and more onerous. Some of our cities have actually had a significant loss of population over the last 10, 15 years. It's hard to recover. The state has to step in to bail them out. The state's not going to step in to bail us out, and I don't expect it. But we need that investment where the opportunities are being realized. And that doesn't mean that I want to cheat out the people who are struggling to live. I don't want to cheat out the education for their children. That we need to do. But we also need to invest in the future rather than go down a path where we continue to lose the future workforce as a state. I believe that we have to establish the environment for our future growth. And it's tough because politically people want, they want stuff now, and we have to figure out how to accommodate that, but we have to invest for the future. The world is changing underneath us.
Yeah.
So let's be smart about it, and let's not lose our values. But that doesn't mean that we're going to be able to stay exactly the way they are. So here I am, and I'm past 65 now, Matt. And I don't believe in blowing things up to make change like so many people at the extreme edges of our political discourse these days. But I do believe that we have to continue to adapt and evolve. And if we don't adapt and evolve, we will go the way of the dinosaurs. And that's the real challenge for the state of Connecticut. Are we going to be dinosaurs? I'm trying to go a different direction in Stamford, and it's a complicated and challenging path politically. But that path is working. And that's the thing that I want to draw the attention. That path is working, and it is working without any real support from the state to provide the education opportunities in particular for our small kids that come from disadvantaged backgrounds.
A lot of plans and projects that municipalities had for 2020 and coming into this year ended up getting postponed, canceled, changed. Are there any projects that you're looking forward to getting back to when, the situation permits? And more generally, how do you feel about the future? Are you optimistic about the economic rebound after we kind of get things back to normal?
Well, I believe in Stamford we're going to recover, and we have set a foundation that, people say, oh, we're going to work on making the economy recover, we're going to do this and do that. We've set a foundation that it will recover. I have to do more to make it recover as fast and as robustly as we possibly can, but we're going to recover in Stamford. No question about it once we get this pandemic behind us. I absolutely know that. And the things that we have done to support our small businesses, which were not required by the state, that included mostly support for pickups and drop-offs of food or other things at retail establishments, taking our streets with the lower traffic volume and basically moving out into the streets. And I know that a number of other communities have copied some of the things we're doing. I'm not claiming that we invented them. Somebody did it in El Paso, or somebody did it in Cincinnati, or somebody did it here. And we've tried to do what we can do with the support. But I have absolute confidence that at least in the city of Stamford that we're going to recover. And we can lament that the world has changed, but we have to adapt to the new world order. And a lot of people remember those good days, and I remember, lots of things from their cherished memories.
Yeah.
We need to adapt. And that's what we're trying to do. Is the state collectively prepared to adapt? And I think that this state of steady habits, so to speak, is reluctant to make those adaptations. And because we have pockets of wealth, we're able to survive. But the city of Stamford, when I became mayor, was headed towards bankruptcy.
Yeah.
It was still a long way in the future.
But the trend line was there.
Every year that I knew of, going back longer than I've been here, 50, 60, 70 years, every single year, we were worse off in terms of our unfunded liabilities every single year.
Yeah.
And we have reversed that. And we've got a long way to go, but we're no longer going down. We're starting to come back up. And we are attracting not only the millennials, but the empty nesters that are saying, hey, you want to know something? If you have a dynamic downtown life with a lot of energy, then I want to be there.
Yeah.
That's where people want to be, and that's what we're doing in Stamford. I don't have the crystal ball to see what's happening in the rest of the state, and maybe my characterizations are unfair or maybe even inaccurate. And I will modify my points of view when people bring me hard facts. Bring me the results of what we're doing.
Well, you want to be having those discussions.
I want to have those discussions, and I want to know, don't keep telling me about what you need. Tell me about the results of the programs that you're implementing. Let's stop, just whining, and I'm a professional whiner. I am. Let's stop whining, and let's start solving the problems rather than we're all trying to grab a little piece of the pie. Give me the piece of the pie that I'm fairly deserve, and invest in the places that have programs that work. That's what I'm saying. And we're doing it. And we have to compete every day in order to do that. There's no freebies down here.
No freebies down there. No freebies anywhere. Well, Mayor, thank you so much for talking with us today. We really appreciate it. All right, Mayor, take care. Talk to you soon.
Take care. Bye.
We'd like to thank our guest, Mayor David Martin. Thanks to our premier sponsors, Digital Back Office, Palo Alto Networks, who you can check out at digitalbackoffice.com and paloaltonetworks.com. The Municipal Voice is a co-production by CCM and WNHH 103.5 FM. Kevin Maloney is our executive producer, Christopher Gilson is our producer, Harry Draws is on the boards, and I'm Matt Ford, your host. Be sure to check out our Facebook page and give us a like, and watch out for our CCM chat series on our YouTube page.
Are you interested in running for office or serving on a local board? The Connecticut Conference of Municipalities and Yale's Campaign School are hosting Representation Matters, a free two-day training session February 13th and 27th to give you the tools to make this a reality. Visit ccmcares.com for more info and how to register.